There was a major event that took place over the weekend that leading up to it, there was great anticipation and speculation as to how it was going to go, and that is the return of David Lee Roth to the stage after 5 years. He was announced as one of the headliners of the M3 Rock Festival in Columbia, Maryland, which, if you're not familiar with M3, is an annual festival that predominantly features a lot of 80s rock bands. I've never been there personally, but every year the lineup is right up my alley. And alongside David Lee Roth, the headliners this year were Sebastian Bach on Friday night, and then Stephen Pearcy and Warren DeMartini back together again, performing classic Rat stuff, which would just be absolutely killer to see. Very, very jealous if you've had a chance to see that. But David Lee Roth has not performed live, publicly at least. I guess he did a Home Depot corporate event in 2023, I believe, but he has not performed publicly in 5 years since March of 2020 when he was supporting Kiss on the End of the Road tour, pre-pandemic, and then I don't remember for sure, but given that up until this last weekend, his last performance was on March 10th, 2020, I mean, that was right when the world was shutting down, so if I recall, that tour was upended early by the pandemic, and then when they announced more dates after the pandemic, when Kiss went back out on the road, they did not bring David Lee Roth with him, so this is a big deal. Big deal. David Lee Roth back after 5 years. But when that tour with Kiss was actively ongoing, of course, footage popped up on YouTube, and it really was a wildly mixed bag of opinions over his voice and how he sounded. And back then, he was 65 years old, and then later on, he announced his retirement over some health issues. So when he was announced as one of the headliners at M3, there was a lot of discourse online over how he was going to sound. Would he play any of his solo stuff? Obviously, it was assumed that a majority of the set would at least be Van Halen, but certainly would be cool to hear some solo hits. He definitely had some success as a solo artist. And all of those questions were answered when he took the stage this past Saturday night for a 16-song set comprised only of Van Halen songs from his era in the band, of course. And as far as his voice goes, I mean, what can I say? I really think, all things considered, David Lee Roth sounded the best that he has sounded in quite some time. That's not to say that it was an incredible performance by any means, but he really did sound pretty good, especially when you take into account that he is now 70 years old. And honestly, I mean, I think David Lee Roth is one of the greatest frontmen of all time, but I don't think anybody considers David Lee Roth to be, this world-class singer or something like that, but he is just an absolutely incredible frontman. That stage presence is just, it's iconic. I really do think David Lee Roth is one of the best frontmen of all time. And so he sounded great over the weekend. And it wasn't just him, though. His band is absolutely excellent, especially his guitar player, Al Estrada is his name. Certainly you cannot replace Eddie Van Halen, but Jesus Christ, that guy, Al Estrada, is just insanely phenomenal. I believe he was with Dave back in 2020 on the Kiss tour. He's still there today, and just such an insanely good player. And in my opinion, he does do a great job of capturing the playing of Eddie Van Halen. I'm not sure who the rest of the band consisted of. I don't know their names, but there was a lot of dialogue in the comments on some videos of the show on YouTube about the drum riser, which looks a lot like the one that Alex Van Halen used on the final Van Halen tour back in 2015. People are, wondering how Dave acquired it, if it's in fact the same one that Alex used from that tour. Maybe he bought it when Alex did that auction recently where he sold off all of his stuff. Maybe it was in storage, maybe it's a replica. I don't know. Who really cares? Because either way, I did think that was a pretty cool thing to see. It was quite a production. It definitely was very reminiscent of Van Halen's final production. But perhaps the most interesting thing about the show is that David Lee Roth had 4 guys on stage doing backing vocals, and that was it. Their sole role in the band is just to do the backing vocals, mostly on those big Van Halen choruses. I guess during some David Lee Roth shows in the past, he was accused of having the backing vocals on a track, and so now he has corrected that, which is great. I mean, I'm not as opposed to tracks in certain situations as some people are, like Eddie Trunk, but live is, of course, always better. I want the rawness of a rock show. I mean, that's what rock and roll is. It's not supposed to be pretty, especially 100% of the time. But with the backing vocalists, there were a total of 7 backing singers on stage. You had the guitarist, Al Estrada, you had the bassist, the keyboard player, and the 4 backup singers all doing vocals, and it really did sound great, but in my opinion, it does really shine a spotlight on what Michael Anthony brought to that band in terms of vocals, because despite 7 backup voices plus David Lee Roth, so I guess 8 in total, the absence of Michael Anthony was still felt, at least in my opinion. But all in all, I gotta say, from the footage I saw, it sounded excellent. That seems to be the common consensus all the way around. And that is probably much to the chagrin of Sammy Hagar, who recently did an interview with Rolling Stone, and when the interview brought up that Dave was coming out of retirement, they wrote that Hagar's response was him literally falling off his chair, roaring with laughter out of the frame of the camera. And then I guess when they asked him why he was laughing so hard, Sammy said, quote, "It ain't over until it's over." Listen, he may not. Let's see if he makes the shows. Who knows what Dave is up to? Well, now we know exactly what Dave is up to, because on Monday morning, a very unsurprising announcement was made, and that is that David Lee Roth is going on tour this summer. He's got 21 shows right now around the U.S. between July 22nd and September 14th, which I really think was to be expected. I mean, it makes total sense. And obviously, something that I've been thinking about is, with this M3 performance over the weekend, Dave has had 5 years essentially to rest and get back in shape, which is another thing too about that M3 show. He looked great as well, the best I've seen him look in quite a while. But, that's doing just a fly-in show. It's a one-off. He's had no other shows other than that Home Depot thing, I guess, like a year and a half ago. But really no shows in 5 years, so plenty of time to rest. But then when you actually get out on the road, I mean, that certainly wears you down with the constant traveling, all that kind of stuff, especially, once this tour really kicks in with consistent shows around mid-August. The first handful of dates are really spread out. There's a lot of gaps in between them. So it will be interesting to see how his voice holds up throughout the tour. He canceled a Vegas residency a few years back. Maybe that's something that we could see again down the road potentially. He joked during the M3 performance that it's the end of his first retirement or something like that. So clearly he has every intention to get back out there. And then, of course, Sammy Hagar is in the middle of a Vegas residency right now with his Best of All Worlds band. He, of course, has always sounded great, and he still does. I really don't think it is much of a question. The question is always Van Halen or Van Hagar, David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar, but I don't think the question really is ever, who's overall the better singer, because I think the answer, by and large, is Sammy Hagar, although, again, I would put Roth hands down as one of the best frontmen ever. But, really, I mean, plenty of opportunities lately to see Van Halen songs performed live. If you saw or are seeing the Hagar residency in Vegas, or you saw the Best of All Worlds tour last summer and you're going to catch Roth this summer, or you saw him over the weekend at M3, lots of classic Van Halen out on the road lately. Plus, Wolfgang, of course, very active with Mammoth, and that is a great band. Mammoth is certainly one of my favorite newer rock bands. The 2 albums so far have been excellent. The new single from Mammoth is awesome. So lots of Van Halen and Van Halen adjacent things out there right now, and that is never a bad thing. You can never have too much Van Halen. But for now, that is all that I got for you. Thank you so much for hanging out. Feel free to drop a like and subscribe below if you feel like it, and I'll see you next time.